Welcome everyone to Seattle Theater Group's CineClub for Silent Movie Mondays. We're glad you're here. We'll have a conversation with our wonderful guests, and it is kind of a loose conversation, and we all have a glass of wine if you want to get one too, in the tradition of CineClub that usually is in the Paramount Bar. Please do. Tonight is a little different. Well, not just because we're on Zoom, but also we're packing in 3 films and 3 stars instead of 1 film and 1 star. So we want to be able to go deep with everyone. So my name is Vicky Lee. I am Seattle Theater Group's curator of Silent Movie Mondays. Here at home behind me is my books. And we also have joining us Janice Findley with the
Hey everybody
behind, John Gordon Hill with his books, and Jeff Crouse. I want to read just a little brief bio, not long, but just a little brief to give context to these wonderful scholars on film. Janice Findley produces and directs experimental narrative films and live theater. Her films have been shown in many places, including MoMA, places in New York City, the National Archives in DC. She's also a film history instructor and co-founder curator of adventurous long-running Seattle-based New Film New City. Janice has done CineClub before and love working with you, Janice. Thank you for joining us. She will be talking about Greta Garbo and Flesh and the Devil. Next, we have John Gordon Hill, who's also worked with us before in CineClub. He has a long filmmaking career spanning more than 4 decades, has shot many dramatic pieces, many documentaries, hundreds of TV commercials for organizations all over the country. He's a past chair of Cornish College of the Arts and has taught writing and film production at Seattle Central College, and just knows a lot about film and also has scored some films. Jeff Crouse is a new friend of ours, and this is his first CineClub. Yay, Jeff. And may I say Dr. Jeff Crouse. He's a film studies scholar and specializes in silent cinema, aesthetics, and expressions of philosophy of film. He's done a lot of projects at Zion National Park, written books, done things with Northwest Film Forum, and has written a lot about Clara Bow and her featured film, Children of Divorce. John will be talking about the film star Rudolph Valentino and his film, Blood and Sand. So welcome, everyone. So I'm just going to open with one question. In your mind, and we'll start with Janice, then go to John, and then go to Jeff. In your mind, what is the star power appeal of these 3 greats and the films that they're in? Janice Garbo.
Okay.
Sister behind you there.
It's, I went through today and kind of looked at a number of quotes of different people that some worked with her, some just watched her films, or from Hollywood. People like Betty Davis, who said, I don't know what it is that she does, but she's simply astounding. Many actors that worked with her said she was just the best actor they ever worked with. She had qualities that, people endlessly try to analyze, but she definitely had an eroticism that was something very different in terms of what type of eroticism, whether it's a very sophisticated eroticism, you could say European because she's Swedish. We don't really know what is that quality. Yeah. So she had this incredible charisma. At the same time, her skill just developed and developed and developed. I think this is her 3rd Hollywood film, Flesh and the Devil. She's much better in this than the 2 previous, but each of those, she just makes an impression. She's stunning. She just has this quality out the gate. The film following this, Love, you see also with John Gilbert, you see just this relaxed quality that she didn't quite have in Flesh and the Devil, although it's much better than the previous two, but also this real dimensional acting, much more subtle.
Mm-hmm.
I did just read a bit in David Thompson's biographical dictionary, and he sort of says, and I can't quite remember if he's quoting someone else, but that she is like a goddess who can't really let in her worshipers, that they're sort of at a distance, and that there's some quality that she has like that I think fascinates people. But she also has a vulnerability, an aloofness. I could just go on and on. She really still continues to fascinate.
Big
And just
appeal.
say again, Vicky?
Big appeal.
Yes, she's just really astonishing. And they were trying to really typecast her.
Mm-hmm.
And her type is Garbo. That is her type. There's just one of her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you want to share images now or come back to that?
Yeah, sure. So I have a little trove of publicity shots that were taken on Flesh and the Devil. I believe the person who shot, I'm not sure if he shot all of them, but he shot a number of them, a man named Burt Longworth.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just share the screen here with you. Hold on. Okay, so first off, I'll just start with, hold on, the one that just them on the bench after when she's in her widow's garb, of she and her co-star John Gilbert, who will talk a little bit about, fell madly in love on this picture. See, here's another shot. This is a publicity shot of the very famous first kiss that they have in the film. William Daniels, the fabulous cinematographer who really connected with Garbo, he gave John Gilbert two little pencil arcs, these little lights, that would blast light out, because the type of film stock that they had in 1926 would not pick up a match. You just wouldn't see it at all. So I'm guessing he didn't burn his hands, because I think of little carbon arcs as being extremely hot. So let me go on to the next one. This is the probably picture most people are aware of. It's also this film. Often we had great, what would you say, sexy stars, people like Gloria Swanson, Rudolph Valentino. This is a film where the wattage of each actor, John Gilbert and Greta Garbo, just electrified audiences, embarrassed some audience members because it seemed too intimate, because they literally were falling in love. They hadn't known each other before this film. Often the director, Clarence Brown, was yelling cut, and they would not stop kissing. They just went crazy for each other. Also, this is one of the first films with more of a horizontal kind of love making. They're careful to keep, I think, John Gilbert's feet on the floor, but it still was very hot stuff for the day. Here's another one where her husband, played by Mark McDermott, comes in. Again, this is like a publicity shot, so they're a little different than what's in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And again, she's just so gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of John Gilbert too, so I really like him in this film too. Here's the scene where she comes to his house, and Hertha, that character, is standing on the stairs. Let's see. And this is like them, oh wait, for some reason that one didn't open up, hold on. Okay, this is Gilbert being very frustrated with her that she won't run away with him as she promised. Okay, and I gotta open this one more time. I think I just have maybe one or two more here. This is sort of his, oh gosh, I keep clicking the wrong thing, hold on. This is them in, it's sort of like his little garden house that's on his property. There's just sort of this way he's looking at her almost ferally. I mean, he's just, you know, they both just have this, I guess they're so believable because they really are almost living the characters that they're playing. Now this one, this is one of my favorites. This is offset. However, it is posed, but because their first kiss in particular, they started laughing. Burt Longworth, the photographer, just said, oh, I got to get some things of them just laughing and enjoying themselves. So it is posed, but they were sincerely enjoying the heck out of each other's company.
For sure.
And let's see, do I have one more? Let's see. That might be the last one. Oh, I have one just of Gilbert. Oh, let me just make that bigger. Here we go. So, so one of the things with film is this film was a star vehicle for John Gilbert, not Garbo. I mean, they just thought, let's pair her with them. And Thalberg, I think, is probably the one that thought it up. And the minute they saw dailies of them kissing, lovemaking, they're like, okay, Francis Marion, you need to write more scenes of them kissing right away. So they had her writing away, adding more love scenes. And it definitely, you know, word was sort of getting out that there's some big love affair happening on this film.
Thanks, Janice.
Yeah.
John, Rudolph Valentino, Blood and Sand.
Well, what's really interesting, and I love coming into this after Garbo, and thank you, Janice, the pictures are fabulous. I don't have a good set of pictures like that. I will show you a few other things in a minute. But when you see Garbo, you see someone you can readily identify as a modern woman, as a modern sex symbol, as a precursor for what's coming. Valentino, I would place on the other end of that. He is the trailing edge of a tradition that was actually on its way out by the 30s. He was almost, he was a satirical figure by that point. So his star power, I think, is very much of the moment. And it's really interesting. Obviously, he was Italian, born in 1895, came to America in 1913. But by the time he was in Hollywood in the late teens, early 20s, they had a niche of a place called the Latin lover. So even though he was not Latin, they made him
the Latin
lover. Yes, and he, you know, finds he's in this place that's really this nexus of what sexuality was like at that moment in time. And Valentino was very confusing for men. Women got him right away. He had this way of withholding and smoldering, of using his eyes, of being somewhat reticent. He could take command, he could sweep them off of their feet, but he did it in a way that was, if I may say, he had a feminine side to him that women related to very strongly, a vulnerability. And in Blood and Sand, you see that frequently. It's actually this three-way triangle that he's in the middle of three different women: his mother, his wife, and his lover. And he kind of that's the web that he is caught in some ways. He was thought of by a lot of men, tried to write him off as being effeminate, possibly gay. He wasn't, but I think the director, Fred Niblo, played with that a little bit in Blood and Sand, in that fabulous scene where he's in Nita Naldi's apartment, and there's a kind of servant figure in a turban and hot pants, lighting up his cigarette that's like got candy cane kind of stripes down it. You don't know what it is. And the look between Valentino and that servant was marvelous, because it was like 50 different thoughts going back and forth. What what's the deal here? Who are you exactly? And so it was a real interesting play, I think, on Valentino and what he represented as sexuality. I think also, as you mentioned with Garbo, part of her appeal was her European foreignness in a way.
Yeah.
The same with Valentino. The country was just coming out of World War I. There were a lot of returning soldiers who had spent time in Europe. And so suddenly stories that evolved around Spain or you know, these foreign environments with someone like that had a certain box office appeal.
Right.
Valentino in Blood and Sand, when we first see him, he's a boy. He's an adolescent with a big mop of curly hair. Publicists were writing about the film when they're getting early pictures, publicity shots with Valentino with his curly hair, hastened to tell his female lovers, you know, fans, that this was just for the movie and he was going to have his slicked back hair later on. That was not his new look.
Yeah.
And his body language was quite wonderful. He really he's very light on his feet and very boyish and bouncy and kind of a scamp, you know, in his rags. And then
had that dancer training.
Very much so. And then there's a marvelous scene where he does actually do a dance sequence when he's first gaining fame as a toreador, and he's in this restaurant and the dancer there invites him to dance, and they do this marvelous pas de deux, and then he throws her over. But as he gets more sophisticated and kind of darker, the sort of life gets complicated for him. And I think that's what's sort of interesting, is to watch how he as an actor portrays life not being quite so black and white, if you'll pardon me saying.
That's what makes it interesting.
It really makes it interesting. And he's coming off of this as a character, you know, where he was in The Sheik, but just a year before this, he was very much the dashing, sweep the woman off of her feet sort of character. In this, he's more in relationship with his female characters. I think, though, that he was also someone in life who really loved working with women. He had this great collaboration and respect for women in his life. The person who discovered him was June Mathis, who was the screenwriter of Blood and Sand. And they had a very strong relationship for many years. They had a falling out and then got together just before his death. And she actually provided the crypt that his ashes are in. She's actually right next door to June Mathis in the columbarium in Hollywood.
Well, thank you for bringing that up about women. I think sometimes with silent stars, we put them in this little box, and these three stars certainly were in a box.
One of the things he wanted to do is, if I could just show one thing.
Oh, yes, please, sorry.
He to establish his cred as a man, he was actually very technically interested and adept. And this is a picture of him basically working with the camera, and the cameraman showing around, and he's showing them basically how to thread the camera, and that he knows his way around that. The other picture that's here that's really great is a publicity shot, a joke publicity shot of him on a burro with Fred Niblo, the director, on the set of Blood and Sand.
Oh, cool.
So you can see he's laughing it up and having a good time.
Had to have fun. It's always fun to see these stills, isn't it? Behind the scenes.
And if I could say one other woman that was important in this film quickly is Dorothy Arzner, who was uncredited in the film, but was in fact the editor of the film. And this was one of her starts. She was an incredibly prolific editor who went on to become one of the great women silent film directors. Here's a picture of Dorothy directing. And as, I'm sorry, get there. As one of the male cohorts said, of course, it took a woman to figure out that you could turn a megaphone into a director's viewfinder.
I'm really glad you brought up Dorothy Arzner, and I'm going to segue to Jeff here in a second, because in curating this original series, the Garbo film was A Woman of Affairs, and we couldn't get it for us to stream, so that's why we went to Flesh and the Devil. Blood and Sand was the one we curated. The Clara Bow film was going to be Get Your Man, which was directed by, who you just mentioned, Dorothy Arzner.
Right.
So, Jeff, please share the star power appeal of Clara Bow and how it's demonstrated in Children of Divorce, please.
Wow, I could talk a lot about this.
I know.
I really can. I just want to kind of preface by saying that I'm actually writing a book on Clara Bow's husband, who was Rex Bell, who was a cowboy star, who kind of swept her off her feet out of Hollywood, and they relocated to Southern Nevada in 1931. So I actually, having just lived a few years back in Southern Nevada, I knew their ranch intimately, called the Walking Box, and I'm the only, and I feel very humble in saying this, the only scholar who's been able to reach and interview Clara Bow's son.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Her remaining child. But to answer your question about Clara Bow and her persona, she both is in line with Valentino and Garbo, and she's also very opposite both of them. Where she's in line is her sex appeal, which translates to this day. I think like Louise Brooks, she's a person that's of her time, so she looks like she's from the 20s.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, she looks contemporary.
Right.
So you can show pictures of Clara Bow to people today, and they don't have to use their imagination that this was 90 years ago.
Yes.
That she's got this stunning attractiveness that still reaches us today in a very fresh way. So she doesn't feel like a history book.
Yeah.
She feels like something living. And about her beauty, Janice was quoting, that's why I smiled when she said that, the David Thompson Biographical Dictionary. The last line that Thompson says, and it's about her beauty, very short, says, it was people like Clara Bow who taught cameras how lucky they were.
How lucky they were.
Yes.
Yep.
So they, so all three have the sex appeal that still is felt today, which is kind of great. But where she differs from Garbo and Valentino is that she's very American. So she doesn't have this foreignness at all. She's the girl next door. She came from very humble roots in tenements, and she had a childhood not unlike Charlie Chaplin. She had in dire poverty. She was born, and her mother suffered from mental illness that Clara herself would have. She was in 1949 diagnosed as being schizophrenic. Unfortunately, one of her sons that was carried on to, and that's the one that I know about. That's one of the reasons why he's not been interviewed. But Clara Bow's appeal, going back to that question, is that she had this ability that stunned people that were behind the camera and in front of the camera. That she could not simultaneously, but very quickly, she could give, like in It, you see that she's always talked about, where she is in 3 different rapidly succeeding facial poses. She's on the one time, she's very innocent and sweet. She's the girl next door. And then the next shot or the next pose of her in a split second is lascivious. And she's very into the man that she's with.
That's right.
And then, but as she put it in an interview with in 1928, and that is that at that point, she knew she was scandalizing grandmothers. So in the next instant, she would have this other more ingenue look, more innocent look, as if to reassure them, I'm not going to take away your son or husband.
Yeah.
Okay. And she could do this in such rapid succession. That's how she got the job in Hollywood. Yeah. I don't know how many people know, but she was 16 years old, Her life was going nowhere in Brooklyn. She saw an ad that was asking for auditions, and a studio was going to pick one star out of hundreds of thousands in America to be in this movie. So it was a whole publicity parade.
Right.
And her mom was against, in fact, her mom didn't know because her mom would have killed her. And I mean, literally would have killed her. Her dad, who was a horrible, terrible man of which nothing could be said about, the one good thing in his life was that she went to him and said, Dad, I need some money to take a picture, have a picture taken of me, so I could submit this to this Hollywood production publicity tour, and I want to put my bid in. And he did that.
And she must have had a great picture.
And you can find on the internet. She is just as beautiful at 16 years old. You can see where this is going.
Yes. And she wanted it.
And she wanted it so bad. So, I mean, there were literally thousands of girls who were going to be in this role, this very small role. And she whittled down. And the reason why she ultimately got the job was that she could do, they'd say, like, be sad. And instantly she could cry.
She could do that.
And then I want you to laugh. And then she just starts laughing. I mean, and they were stunned that she didn't need any prep time in between those.
Right. She just did it.
She just did it. And I think it's because of her upbringing, actually. I think it was survival.
Yeah.
You know? So then when she was finally hired by a major studio, which was Paramount, but she worked for a lot of studios, independent places. She did a Tom Mix Western. But in 1925, she did Black Oxen, which was directed by the man who directed Children of Divorce, which is Frank Lloyd. I actually have a thin, somewhat connection with Frank Lloyd's granddaughter. And the granddaughter, Antonia, has actually told me stories that have not been published.
I'm sure there's many.
Oh, well, most of them died with people when they died. But
before we go to our questions, do you have just a couple things? You had a book or a couple things to show. Do you want to do that right now? And then
I'm going to just show this. Okay, get this in the right position.
Yes, read the book.
Okay, please. This is the book by David Sten.
Okay.
It's called Clara Bow, Running Wild. And it is a book you should read if you love silent film or you like biographies. Cool. I would say, however, as entertaining and as enthralling as it is, you might not want to read it before going to bed at night. Okay. Because her life was really tragic.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of tragedy in all of these lives. Well, hold on.
Vicky, could I do my book too?
One book.
And this is a book that Vicky also has. And for anyone that loves Greta Garbo, Mark Vieira's book on Greta is fabulous.
Fabulous.
Mark is a photo archivist, a photo artist himself, and a great historian. What's so amazing about this book is you feel like you've spent time with her because you are seeing some of the best photographs of her while you read about each film that she starred in. It's really cool. Like it just transports you. So anyway, okay. She totally did. And I know that she loved William Daniels. There were some films she couldn't get him. I think, it's a film that's lost, so we don't really know what it looked like. But The Divine Woman, that was sort of based on Sarah Bernhardt, she couldn't get William Daniels because Norma Shearer got him because she was married to Irving Thalberg and could get whatever she wanted from MGM. But Daniels and she had a very simpatico relationship. He really felt protective of her. She had a phobia of people that she didn't know. So she couldn't bear to have anyone on set that wasn't supposed to be there.
Didn't she have kind of a closed curtain?
He actually, Daniel started making partitions for her on his own. Yeah. And then pretty soon everybody got the drift of doing that. And then she would try to have all the same crew people if she could.
Yeah.
Her last film, which some feel made her retire, it's a sound film called Two-Faced Woman. She did not have William Daniels. And she doesn't look good. She's not well photographed.
Yeah.
She's getting older, and she saw herself in that film as the story goes, and just felt like, I'm out of here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
John.
Sure. One of the things that Valentino really wanted was to shoot the film in Spain, and he was turned down flat by Lasky, which was the production company. So it was in fact shot in Hollywood, and I don't have specific information about who the set designer was, but I know that there was a lot of interpolated footage from Spain. There was actual stock footage that the studio owned.
Right.
And if I may go back to Dorothy Arzner that we were talking about, was the editor on this picture. And she was editing at an astounding rate. She cut 32 films in a single year.
Oh my goodness.
And at one point, she was cutting this film, and she just started using this stock footage that they had from bullfights in Madrid, and then went back and said, can we shoot these sequences close up of Rudy doing his thing? And she got that footage and she cut it together. And it was like, well, if I can read a thing here, she cut it was working so well that they had initially they were going to mat him into stock footage shots. They ended up deciding not to do that. And she said, I was running blood and sand in the production room when Jim Cruise passed through the adjoining theater. He paused to watch. Suddenly, in an exclamation, he said, my God, who cut that picture? I wasn't sure if this meant approval or disapproval, but I quietly admitted I did. When the lights went up, he asked me if I would cut his next picture, The Covered Wagon. Wow, yeah. So Blood and Sand, her ingenious use of footage of street scenes and scenes in the big arenas in Madrid with the stuff that they had shot in Hollywood really worked wonderfully well and was a real jump starter for her career.
If I could just interject, just kind of full circle here, Jeff, with Clara Bow, I don't know, for me, I just think of her eyes so much. Can you talk just a little bit about how she was shot and framed, particularly in this film?
Well, yes, this film was directed, like I said, by Frank Lloyd. However, there's a sequence, there was a couple days reshooting with Joseph von Sternberg. And von Sternberg was, the way he describes it in his autobiography, he said, I became really adept at copying other filmmaker styles, because he would do this for other films as well. So he would be hired to kind of paper over the cracks and be, post-production almost kind of person, refilming. And so actually the most striking, although I think that's true, I think the most striking moment in the film, the most striking sequence, is that of her suicide.
Yeah.
And that is, we see the tracking, the camera, the doors are closing, and she's going to her bed, where she'll take her life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But she had this very perky persona, and she was always trying to get deep roles.
Yeah.
But Paramount wouldn't do that. So they had a setup where 4 times a year, 1 Bow film per season. So it'd be the spring Bow, the summer Bow, etc. And she was just aching for depth.
Yeah.
And so she's got this fluff. She got this and she had to carry these movies on her own, which wasn't easy to do, especially with her schizophrenia and the scandals that were kind of going on sometimes during her life. And she I don't know, she kept it together. She must have loved a role like Children of Divorce. It was meaty. She's the villain of the piece.
Right.
And yet she does something with her personality, of course, with her body, and of course, there's other factors as well, like the clothes that she's given, the way the sets are lit in a very silent film style, where they're pulled back. It's not a television close-ups. It's more when you see the ceiling, okay? Which that's true of a lot of silent movies, which you don't even see that anymore, right? That she must have relished this, but she's able to make us still like her.
Yeah.
Even though she's the face of the oppressive system that rules within the world of that film.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, let's talk about the music. Let's just go Janice, John, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
So on The Flesh and the Devil, the fabulous Carl Davis, he's a British composer, composed this later. I think it's done in the 80s. I'm not totally sure on when he composed it. It's like a 60-piece orchestra. He has two killer orchestrators. I'm thinking the Matthew brothers, Colin and David, and Colin worked with Benjamin Britten, if you guys are into classical music. This score, Carl Davis did a number of great silent scores, Harold Lloyd's Safety Last. Let's see, of course I'm going to start, The Big Parade, the wonderful John Gilbert film that he did the year before Flesh and the Devil that profited MGM $5 million. It's also a great film. And this film, which is got the most fabulous love theme, we hear it the minute John Gilbert lays eyes on Greta Garbo at the train station. It comes back every time they meet. But there are also this sense of foreboding that's in the score, that you're getting clued in that bad things are ahead for these two lovers. But it's got to be one of Carl Davis's greatest scores. He's also done more modern things, the Pride and Prejudice thing that A&E produced, I think it is, with Colin Firth. So he's done some modern things as well.
John, the score that we heard for Blood and Sand.
Actually, I don't have much to say about that because I saw a different version. So I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think it was William Perry did the score. But one thing I wanted to interject, of course, when we have our live CineClubs, we have the musicians joining us, whether it's an ensemble, a composer like Amy Denio, or our wonderful organists. And the approach to their live scores is sometimes there is an existing score from the silent era, but more times than not, it's a little too melodramatic. So they often piece together material from the period and take creative license. And then, of course, during the shooting of the silent films, there was an ensemble, or at least a piano, providing that ambient music. Jeff, do you know anything about the score that we've heard with Children of Divorce?
Very much. Yes, very much. Rodney Serra was the composer of the score. He's the leader of a Colorado-based, around Denver, Mont Alto Motion Picture Symphony. I should say orchestra, not symphony. And I've worked with him about 4 or 5 times, and we have another gig coming up at Zion. We get together at Zion. There's a lot of silent films that were done there, like Ramona. We bring it to the little town of Springdale. So we have a live score, and then I'll do commentary, and it's beautiful.
Wonderful. So the music makes it.
Yeah, Rodney did the score for this, and in his notes, he says that, Children of Divorce is about a world in which the characters participate in the oppression around them, and they become their own worst enemies. But the film does not create any critical distance. Like in a Douglas Sirk film in the 50s, you would have people and their problems as reflections of society, of people being entrapped. But then there would be Sirk that would say, well, look at these people. They're they don't need to be this way. Okay. So the film is not endorsing this world. But in Children of Divorce, Frank Lloyd is endorsing this world. Okay. And so when Rodney was going through, and you know, how do you do the score? Are you going to do it counterpoint, or are you going to do it in the style and spirit of the film itself? And he said, you know what? I can't change the film. I can only be faithful
Enhance
to
it. Yeah, well, many times I have heard the organist say, if you're listening to the music, I haven't done my job. You know, you want it to be part of it.
Well, actually, so okay, the first part, I actually don't think the pastor is meant to be comic relief. I mean, this is it's hard for us to get our heads around the morals of the time. I mean, this film set off a whole censorship kind of ruling. I wrote down, it's some like odd name. Yeah, it was called The Don'ts and Be Carefuls.
Yes.
And it was a censorship code that came out because of this film.
Wow.
There were people finding it really distressing, you know, that it was not moral. There were just a much different kind of moral setting in the culture than what we have today. So I think, you know, probably, I mean, you see, I think some people would see that pastor as being very, I don't know, unempathetic and stuff to the John Gilbert character in particular. But I don't think they're thinking he's to be made fun of. He's a disturbing character, but they're also probably putting that character in as a viewpoint of some of the audience even. And then the second part of the question, there is an alternative ending, but it's not her not drowning. That's not what, it just has to do with, I think, how I'm trying to remember, I've read what the alternative ending is.
Well,
I think it's
something about, there was another ending for the Midwestern audiences or something. Strange like that.
No, I think that's the next film, Love. There's where they actually shoot it on a different type of film stock, so it looks really different. But yeah, no, there was an alternate editing, but I think they were just trying to happy it up. One was, like, for one thing, Clarence Brown did not want to end this with John Gilbert marrying Hertha. You know, he felt like it should just be this tragic ending. And the studio was feeling like they were getting all this pressure that people wanted happy endings. So they make it that he marries Hertha.
Well, in some ways, with all of those close-ups on John Gilbert and Larson, is that his name?
Yeah.
I wondered if they didn't want to get married because
there's kind of a bromance thing there for sure, you know?
Yeah.
So definitely.
Yeah. I'm seeing a note from one of our attendees that says the alternate ending does appear on the Amazon streaming film at the end after the credits. So if anybody wants to check that out.
Thank you. That's what we love about our audience.
That's great. That's great. I didn't have that on. I think I have it on my disc because I have a disc of it. And I did look at it, but I guess it made like no impression on me because it wasn't Greta living. You know, I'm so upset when she drowns. I'm like, you know, drown the men, don't drown her, you know.
But we were talking earlier, the three of us, that of course you all know if you've seen all three films, and if you haven't, they all die in the end. Poison, suicide,
spoiler alert,
drowning, and a bullfight. So another question.
Great question. Well, I can go into that one. She was wealthy when she retired from Paramount. But what she did do is that she made 2 films for Fox, and she made sure that she got a lot of money for them. I think it was $150,000 per picture. Wow. That allowed her to retire. The 2 films were Call Her Savage, which was one of her 2 favorite personal films, and her oldest son, Rex Bell Jr., remembers that being shown at the ranch. And he remembers the joy that they used to have in watching that film. The other film, the last film, was also a Frank Lloyd movie. And by the way, she loved Frank Lloyd. Frank Lloyd was the first director, the man who directed Children of Divorce. She loved him because when she did the interview for Black Oxen in 1925, playing this evil, not vamp, but flapper, that that he was so kind to her. And he was so different from everybody else. And he made her feel great. So her last film was called Hoopla. And she hated that film.
Yeah.
She hated that film. A couple of reasons why it's a remake is she didn't like remakes. There was a 1929 version called The Barker, which was the first version. And then, believe it or not, if you're a real cinephile, this is interesting, Yasuji Ozu of Japan remade that film 2 times.
Interesting.
And so anyway, she didn't like it also because she's a cougar kind of woman.
Oh.
There's a bet going on about a young man who's a virgin, and she playfully accepts the bet, and she corrupts him, but she falls in love with him. And
Jeff, if I may interject just a
Yes.
second, because we have not yet mentioned a very important man whose name is Gary Cooper.
That's
Riding in on that horse.
Yes, which I wrote an article a couple years back, and I mentioned that. Him riding on the horse. Yes, they were having, that's one thing I'm glad you brought up because I needed to say, is that there was no pretense with Clara Bow. So many other stars came up with this grand biography of their roots. D.W. Griffith says, I'm the descendant of Welsh kings. Well, Bow never, she was
the real
brutally
thing.
Honest about her upbringing. Yeah. And that also included within the Hollywood colony, not so much outside until later on, that she loved sex.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just unashamed about it.
Right.
If a man can do this, I can do this.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
1 year alone, 27, she had 3 lovers, and one was Gary Cooper, and they loved each other a lot.
There you go. John, do you know, or Janice?
Yeah, it's a little up for debate, but basically, one of the stories was that his voice was too high pitched, and that's not really true. Okay. One of the things was he and Louis B. Mayer did not get along. Irving Thalberg, who became head of production, I think in 1925 at MGM, he was a friend of John Gilbert's and acted as sort of a buffer between them. But then he became ill. Louis B. Mayer kind of took over the production stuff. He really did not like Gilbert. They did not get along. There's all kinds of, different run-ins they had with each other. And so it looks like he pretty much started just assigning Gilbert crappy movies to be in. And just not caring that he was paying him this huge salary. He was making $10,000 a week at the time of Flesh and the Devil.
Yeah.
But there were other things, like the first film, if I'm recalling from his daughter's book, he didn't really take it seriously sound. So he didn't, like some actors were really working on their voices and their diction. And because as an actor, you are an instrument and your voice is part of that instrument. He had not been using that at all in the silent pictures. So first thing out the gate, he's not doing well with his voice. There are people saying that things were actually altered, or nothing, like, what would you say, on his sound recording, there are people that say they actually, Mayer instructed some of the sound people to actually make his voice sound more tinny. I don't know for sure if that's true. There's all kinds of speculation like that. I've read interviews of people saying that is absolutely true, but I don't know, but he just, as things started going south for him, he just came unglued. And so he was drinking very heavily and died young of a heart attack. Garbo brought him in for her Queen Christina movie. And he was just depressed, knowing, I think, that she was the only reason he was there.
I love her.
So he went from being the top star, I think, after Valentino died, to just being like a has-been almost. And he just couldn't cope with it, I think.
Thank you, Janice. What else?
So one of the things was she absolutely hated being these seductresses, these vamps. I think she correctly saw that her career was going to tank if that's all she played. But she also just didn't like it. She didn't like that it was so narrow. She wanted something more developed in terms of her characters. So I think the next film that they called her in on, I think she got, I'm trying to think if she just refused, I think she just refused to do it. And the film bombed anyway. They did make it with someone else and it just completely bombed. Then she pulled in Gilbert's manager, who had negotiated his contract. His name's Harry Eddington. And he was married to the lady Barbara Kent that played Hertha in the film. So between her talking to Gilbert, who she's pretty much living with at this time, and Eddington, she was advised to, like really start playing a little bit more hardball.
Yeah.
She was making, I think, $400 a week when she started shooting this movie. Gilbert's making $10,000 a week.
Yeah.
I think she turned 21 by the end of the film and was making $200 more a week. But they were all saying, you should be getting more money. I think her biggest thing was the roles. She just did not want to play these type of roles at all.
In that box. Yeah.
And she did really hold out for months. And as she held out, Flesh and the Devil, the profits started pouring in.
Right.
She ultimately even contacted Lowe's, which were the head of MGM, wrote them a letter. Eddington, I think, had suggested this. That started things started really changing because they're seeing the profits and they're wondering, because I think Louis B. Mayer is just taking it personal and is not going to back down.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. But there's also some weird stuff. She basically almost disappeared for 8 months.
That's right.
There's all kinds of, speculation because Gilbert was hospitalized at one point. They were in a volatile fights. He was pulling guns on her. There were things about, did he shoot her? Did she shoot him?
All the more reason to read
the book. Yeah.
All right, one last question, Amber. I'm going to throw this to the gentlemen, John and Jeff.
Okay, well, I'm going to say,
stab at it.
now, I think Valentino was absolutely the apotheosis of melodrama. It was, in fact, his acting style. It was his milieu. It was about emotion on your sleeve, simple, straightforward plots, in Blood and Sand, they even include this completely gratuitous character, the philosopher, who has a lot of really boneheaded things to say and could have been cut from the film with no loss whatsoever, but he's the essence of melodrama. And Valentino died 4 years after he made Blood and Sand. He died in 1926. He had perforated ulcers, which became peritonitis, and he died in New York, and there were 100,000 people at his funeral, and people went absolutely mad with this loss. He died in the nick of time. The melodramas were on their way out. I think if he had died 4 years later, he would have been a side note in the back pages of Variety.
Well said. Jeff, melodrama question for you.
Melodrama question. I think that Bow is both the apotheosis of this, but then she could also do comedy.
Yeah.
She could, she was adept at either one. And, that's why she was so popular. I believe in 1927, she not only starred in Wings, which was the first Best Picture Academy Award, co-winner with Sunrise, the only time that ever happened with the Oscars, but she was in 4 of the top 10 film releases in 1927.
Wow.
She got like 35,000 fan letters a month.
Wow.
Okay,
Yeah.
so she was really big. We remember her as, you know, the flapper. She wasn't the first flapper,
No.
but she had this liberated sexuality,
Mhm.
and part of the sexuality would be subsumed or part of melodrama, and others would just be out of that box.
Got it.
And
Now, I suppose with I'm sorry to cut, with Valentino dying so young, Bo, Garbo, and Valentino probably didn't know each other, right? Meet. He would have died before.
different studios, maybe.
Yeah, different studios. Anyway, well, certainly star, and star. And I tell you, just for myself, once I go down one of the rabbit holes, I like can't get out because it's so interesting. Not just their film career, but their personal lives and the legacy that they have left. Thank you, guests, John, Jeff, and Janice, the 3 J's. Loved having you here. We miss our theater not being open. We hope it will be by January. The next silent film program will be in March 2021 with the theme of first female directors. So we'll be showing some Lois Weber and a film called Red Kimono and some shorts. And then we do have one other special in March, which was rescheduled from the Seattle Jewish Film Festival, The Ancient Law. So that's coming in the middle there on a Sunday. So we only have kind of a half a season if everything gets open at that time. And then hopefully the next year things will be up and going. Do any of you have any last parting statements before we shut down at our 8 o'clock time? Anything?
I'd just like to thank all the people that were the audience. The questions I just saw popped up on the screen that Antonia Guerrero was one of the people watching, and she is Frank Lloyd's granddaughter.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah,
Cool.
so she heard all
Cool.
this. So I'm thank you, Antonia, for
Oh
participating.
my goodness.
Cool.
We were
Yes.
talking about this in CineClub. Often there's someone related to the star.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and for your family, what they have done. That is fantastic.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
Well, with that, we could go, I'm sure, with more wine and more conversation, but it's 8 o'clock. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you live in the Paramount next March. Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, Vicky.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, John. Bye, Jeff. Bye,
Wonderful.
audience.
Bye, Janice.
And
Bye, Jeff.
Amberly.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yes.